The Christmas embrace, the snow, fell softly on Christmas Eve, dusting the stone steps of St. Michael's Church with a blanket of white. The old building stood tall against the winter sky, its stained glass windows glowing with warm light from within. Carols drifted through the heavy wooden doors, mixing with the quiet hush of falling snow. On the bottom step, away from the cheerful sounds inside, sat a young woman named Emma. She was 23 years old, though the cold had made her look older. Her bare feet were red from the winter chill, and her thin dress offered little protection against the wind. She sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing in particular. Emma had been living on the streets for 3 months now. It had started when she lost her job at the bookstore, then her apartment, then everything else that mattered. She had tried the shelters, but they were always full this time of year. She had tried asking for help, but people looked away. After a while, she had stopped trying. She had stopped hoping. The church steps had become her spot. She didn't go inside, even though the doors were always open. She felt too broken for a place that beautiful, too forgotten. So she sat outside in the cold, listening to the music that reminded her of better times. Inside the church, the Christmas Eve service was ending. Families gathered their coats and scarves, preparing to head home to warm houses and hot meals. Among them was Thomas Bennett, a successful lawyer who had just returned to town after years away. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone whose life had gone according to plan. Thomas stepped outside and paused at the top of the steps, breathing in the cold night air. That's when he noticed Emma sitting below, her shoulders hunched against the wind. Something about her made him stop. Perhaps it was the way she sat so still, as if she had given up on moving forward. Perhaps it was something else. Before Thomas could decide what to do, a small figure burst through the church doors behind him. "Daddy, wait," called a tiny voice. A little girl in a bright red coat came running out, her blonde pigtails bouncing. She was 4 years old, and her name was Sophie. She was Thomas's daughter, and she saw the world with the pure heart of a child who still believed in magic and kindness. Sophie stopped when she saw Emma on the steps. The little girl tilted her head, studying the young woman with curious, caring eyes. Then, before Thomas could stop her, Sophie walked down the steps. "I think you need a hug," Sophie said softly to Emma. Emma looked up, startled. She hadn't expected anyone to speak to her, much less a child. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She saw Sophie's small face, full of innocent concern, and felt something crack inside her chest. "Sweetheart, come back here," Thomas called gently from the top of the steps. But Sophie didn't move. She opened her arms wide, waiting. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. When was the last time someone had offered her kindness without wanting something in return? When was the last time someone had seen her as human? She reached out slowly, and Sophie stepped into her arms, wrapping tiny hands around Emma's neck. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Emma closed her eyes and let herself feel the warmth of another person, the simple comfort of being seen and valued. When Sophie pulled back, she smiled up at Emma. "You're very cold," Sophie observed. "Don't you have shoes?" Emma shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Thomas came down the steps then, more slowly than his daughter had. He looked at Emma properly for the first time, really seeing her. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands shook from more than just cold, the defeated slump of her shoulders. But he also saw something else. He saw someone who had once had dreams, who had once laughed and lived and loved. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, finding her voice. "I didn't mean to. I should go." "No," Thomas said quickly. "Please don't," He paused, searching for the right words. My name is Thomas. This is Sophie. Would you like to come inside, get warm? Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect what little pride she had left. But Sophie was still holding her hand, looking up at her with such hope that Emma found herself nodding. Thomas helped Emma to her feet. She wobbled slightly, weak from hunger and cold. Without a word, Thomas shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he picked up Sophie with one arm and offered Emma his other arm for support. They went inside the church, which was now empty except for the pastor, who was putting away the candles. The warmth hit Emma like a wave, making her realize just how cold she had been. Thomas led her to a pew near the front and sat beside her while Sophie climbed into her lap without invitation. When did you last eat? Thomas asked gently. 2 days ago, Emma admitted. There was a soup kitchen, but... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Thomas nodded. Wait here, I'll be right back. He returned 10 minutes later with Father Michael, the pastor, who carried a thermos of hot soup and a thick blanket. They sat with Emma while she ate slowly, not rushing her, not asking too many questions. Sophie chattered about Christmas and Santa and her new dolly, filling the silence with innocent joy. As Emma ate, Thomas made a phone call. When he returned, he sat back down beside her. There's a woman named Carol who runs a shelter on Oak Street, he said. She always has room when others don't. I called her, and she has a bed for you tonight. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to help you find a job. I have connections all over town. Emma stared at him. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Thomas looked at his daughter, who had fallen asleep against Emma's shoulder. Because a long time ago I was lost too, he said quietly. Different circumstances, but lost all the same. Someone helped me then. Someone believed I was worth saving. He looked back at Emma. You are worth saving. Emma felt the tears come then, hot and fast. She had held them back for so long, but now they flowed freely. Thomas didn't try to stop them. He simply sat beside her, steady and present. That night, Emma slept in a warm bed for the first time in months. And on Christmas morning, when she woke up, she didn't feel quite so lost anymore. She thought of Sophie's small arms around her neck, of Thomas's quiet kindness, of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Sometimes, she realized, all it takes is one person to see you. One person to offer a hug, to extend a hand, to remind you that you matter. Sometimes, hope arrives in the smallest packages, wearing a red coat and pigtails.